Your Whoop strap secretly got better last month, or at least that's what Whoop claims. Whoop launched a new sleep algorithm that is supposed to outperform the old one and is able to better measure your sleep. Well, secretly actually might be a big word, but it wasn't given a lot of attention. Whoop claims that the classification accuracy across the 4 sleep stages has improved by over 7% according to their internal testing. However, this wasn't clarified in more detail, so we don't know how they actually got to the 7%. In this video, we will of course be putting that new algorithm to the test by comparing the performance of the new and the old algorithm against the ZMax EEG headband, which measures brain waves and was specifically designed for sleep stage tracking. But before getting to the test results, we need to understand what it actually means to develop a new algorithm and how it actually works. Let me draw it out for you. Classically, at least, we measure our sleep stages using electrodes that can measure the electrical activity of our brain. This is not a mushroom, this is my brain. Our heart and specific muscles we're interested in. So these electrodes measure electrical activity, so we get different signals. So we have our brain activity, we have our heart rate, and we also have some activity of our muscles. And then an expert sleep scorer can look at each 30 seconds of this data, and for each 30 seconds pretty accurately estimate if this was deep sleep, light sleep, REM sleep, or you were awake. However, of course, the Whoop strap doesn't have electrodes, so it cannot measure any of these things. What it can measure is a few different things. So it can measure your heart rate, so the heart rate frequency, also the distance between heartbeats, so interbeat intervals, this could be 1 second for instance, and also your movement during the night. However, even experts would have difficulty taking this second part right here, so 2, and actually estimating your sleep stages. They're all trained to use this part, so 1, to estimate your sleep stages. So what Whoop now needs to do, and this is quite difficult, is somehow convert these measurements right here into sleep stages. However, even experts aren't able to do this yet. So what many companies do now is they actually have people wear both a Whoop strap. So here we have a person, and this person right here is wearing both a Whoop strap, so a 2, and also polysomnography, so a 1. So based on 1, we can estimate our sleep stages. And based on Whoop, we have these movement measurements. So we have heart rate, the distance between heartbeats and movement. And now, of course, we have nicely connected data. So we can see for each of the sleep stages, what were each of these metrics like. But of course, this is not going to be done by a single individual. So Whoop actually needs to train some kind of algorithm. So here we have an algorithm, and that algorithm is going to be trained to actually connect our measurements of Whoop to our sleep stages. Now, with recent developments in AI and also machine learning, ML, this has gotten better and better. So with the same kind of reference data, you're able to train better algorithms. However, the reason why some companies like, for instance, Apple and also Oura have been quite good at sleep staging is not because they necessarily have better AI and machine learning, but because they have better reference data. So they have more of this right here. I hope this is all visible before, but you basically need a ton, really a ton of data. So you cannot just have data for one person, not even 2 people, but you basically need hundreds or even thousands of people where you measure both data with your reference device, so 1 right here, and also data with your device of interest. And this right here, I expect, is the bottleneck for many devices out there. You just need a ton of data, and that costs a lot of time and also effort. And of course, the biggest companies have the most to invest. So companies like Apple and Oura really have a ton of money to throw at this, especially because for Oura, for instance, this is really a core competency, and this is, I think, also what Whoop did. They just collected more of this data, so now they can potentially improve their algorithm. This is most likely how Whoop did it. They collected a lot more data and were able to hopefully at least build a better algorithm. However, even according to their own metrics, the improvements are not huge, at about 7% or so. And we also don't know where the most gains were achieved. Was it in deep sleep, light sleep, or REM sleep? Can each person expect equal improvements, or has it mainly improved improved, for instance, for people with good or poor sleep quality. Let's see how the new Whoop algorithm did in my testing. By the way, for those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Rob and I'm a postdoctoral scientist specializing in biological data analysis. And here you can see the results for the new algorithm. Now, before going into them, I need to say I have 14 days of data for the reference ZMax and Whoop strap combined. And this is all after February 27th, which is when I got the notification in my app that the sleep stage algorithm was updated. And later on in the video, we'll also look at about 1 month of data for the old algorithm, for which I excluded all data after February 24th, which is the official launch date of the new algorithm. I'm not sure in between February 24th and 27th if I had the new or old algorithm. Now on top here you can see the sleep stages as recorded by the ZMax EEG device, and on the left are the sleep stages as recorded by the new Whoop strap algorithm. Now each column here sums to 100%, meaning that we can see what percentage of each of the sleep stages according to the ZMax was predicted as a sleep stage by the new Whoop strap algorithm. And if the Whoop strap perfectly agrees with the reference device, all values along the diagonal should be 100%. By the way, we're not going to focus on the awake time right here because the ZMax tends to overestimate awake moments. A lot of these short movements are still classified as awake, while I would not really call them awake. So we're going to ignore that column. Now, first of all, we see that about 78% of what the ZMax said was deep sleep is also classified as deep sleep by the Whoop strap. So that's pretty good. And almost all confusion in this case was with light sleep. Light sleep agreement is the worst out of all the stages at about 61%, and that's still pretty good honestly. And the confusion was with both deep sleep and REM sleep at about the same percentage, so around 18-19%. And REM sleep agreement in this case is particularly good at about 77%. The sleep stage most watchers struggle with is REM sleep, and this actually looks pretty good for the Whoop strap, so I'm quite happy with that. And most confusion in this case is with REM sleep. As I said, we're not going to focus on awake time, but just for completeness, about 48% of what the ZMax said was awake time was also classified as awake time by the Whoop straps. So that seems pretty good given the overestimation of awake time by the ZMax, but I don't really want to interpret this. So let's just stick to these 3 sleep stages right here. Now, looking at the individual nights will help us understand the results even better. And here we can see the first night I wanted to share with you. On top here we have the sleep stages as recorded by the ZMax EEG headband, with along the horizontal axis the clock time and my sleep stages on the vertical axis. And on the bottom we have a similar plot, but now for the Whoop strap. And in purple to start with, I highlighted the deep sleep as recorded by the EEG device, so the same marking is here on the bottom. And as you can see, most of the sleep classified as deep sleep by the EEG device was also classified as deep sleep by the Whoop strap. Not all of it was fully detected, and also a bit of extra deep sleep was detected by the Whoop strap. But overall looking pretty good. And for this second night, we more or less see something similar. Most of the deep sleep is detected, a little bit of extra is detected, and not everything is fully detected. But overall, honestly, this looks pretty good. But let's next take a look at the REM sleep, and that is marked in red right here. So in red, we have the REM sleep as detected by the EEG device. And again, this matches pretty well with the Whoop strap. Only this first segment right here is a little bit shifted, and here near the end of the night, according to the EEG device, I was alternating between awake time, REM sleep and light sleep, and the Whoop strap just detected awake time. But otherwise it's looking pretty good. Also this second night looks pretty good. The Whoop strap detects a bit of extra REM sleep here in the beginning, and also a little bit of extra REM sleep throughout the night, but overall the REM sleep segments match quite well. And also for this third night, we more or less see the same thing, and it's quite impressive, especially here near the end of the night where I had a bit of a broken night where I was alternating between REM sleep, awake time and light sleep. The Whoop strap actually did quite a good job, or better than many other devices would, though I did detect a bit more awake time right here. Still overall looking quite good. I'm quite happy with this result, and it seems to be quite balanced between detecting deep sleep, light sleep and REM sleep. So no single stage is doing really poorly, so that's quite good. And we can actually put these new results into the perspective of many other devices I tested in the past, and that is displayed in this overview right here. So this graph shows you an overview of the agreement of different watches with the EEG reference devices. Along the horizontal axis we have the average agreement over the individual sleep stages, and on the vertical axis we have the agreement of the worst sleep stage. That means the better the agreement with any of the reference devices, the more to the top right the device is. Now this overview is slightly complicated because I did use different reference devices. The devices not marked in any color were tested against the Dream 2 EEG headband. Unfortunately, I cannot use it anymore since Dream went bankrupt. The devices marked in blue-purple were tested against polysomnography, which is the gold standard in sleep stage tracking. And the devices marked in green were tested against the ZMax EEG device, so the one we used in this video. And we can see the results for the new Whoop algorithm in green right here. So it's really doing quite well. It's doing about as well or potentially a little bit better as different Fitbit and Google devices, and potentially not quite as well as, for instance, Apple Watches, the H-Sleep Pod 3 and the Oura Ring. Though I have to retest the Oura Ring 4 because I had some issues with my reference device, which is why the Oura Ring 4 is doing a little bit worse than the Oura Ring 3 right here. Still, it could be that the Whoop strap is actually doing about as well as, for instance, the Oura Ring and potentially even the Apple Watch, though I think at least on me the Apple Watch and also the H-Sleep Pod are doing a tiny bit better than the Whoop strap. Still, overall, the new Whoop sleep stage tracking algorithm appears to be really robust and appears to be among some of the better devices out there for me. I'm happy enough with this kind of performance, which is why I actually use the Whoop strap as one of my personal health and sports trackers. So that doesn't look too bad, honestly, for the new Whoop sleep stage tracking algorithm. It's among some of the better devices out there in terms of sleep stage tracking, and it seems to be doing quite well for both deep sleep and REM sleep. And REM sleep is one of the sleep stages where most watches struggle with, so that looks quite good overall. But it's also important to check, of course, how the new algorithm compares to the old one. So let's put them side by side. But first, making these videos next to my day job means I invest a lot of time and money. If you want to support me in making these videos, there are a number of ways to do that. I have an affiliate link to Whoop below, which gives you the best discount possible and supports the channel. But this video is not sponsored by Whoop in any way. They don't even know I'm making this video, and my opinions are completely my own. If, on the other hand, you're interested in tracking your glucose levels and learning what foods cause glucose spikes for you specifically, I would recommend using my affiliate link below to get the best deal on the Levels app. This is the app I personally use to track my glucose levels and also to track my macro food intake. I also just started running more consistently, and I use the Runna app as my digital running coach and running planner. If you want a 2-week trial period to test it out, use my affiliate link below, and again, you'll be supporting the channel. But with that out of the way, let's get back to the testing. And here we have the results for the new algorithm on the left and the old algorithm on the right, side by side. And this is really interesting, honestly. First of all, we can see that the deep sleep agreement of the old algorithm appears to be a bit better, or quite a bit better, at close to 90%. So it's 89% agreement with the reference device. The light sleep agreement is actually very similar, so I don't think there's a big difference there. On the other hand, the REM sleep agreement is a lot poorer with the old algorithm, so this is improved by over 10% in the new algorithm. So just looking at this overall, I would say there has been a change probably in sleep stage tracking, though I find it difficult to say, at least based on these results, that it is actually better. It just appears to be different. Also, the awake time detection is a bit different. Assuming I had similar sleep stage patterns, that might mean that the new algorithm detects different or more awake moments. I really have to dig into this a bit deeper in a later video. Overall, very interesting, but let's now put these results for both the old and the new algorithm in that general overview we were looking at before. So here's that same overview from before, you're familiar with this by now. But now I also added the old Whoop Strap 4.0 algorithm, and you can see that both the old and the new algorithm are basically in the same position on this graph. So overall, on average, the performance appears to be similar. So even though the algorithms are different and are probably making different mistakes, their overall performance, at least in my testing, is similar. So at least on me, based on this testing, they appear to be good and bad at different things, but on average, it averages out to the same overall performance. So based on this, I do expect I get changes in the percentages of the different stages. I just don't expect that the overall accuracy or performance on me will be that different. Oh, and I do want to point out here we also have the results for the old algorithm based on the Dream 2 EEG headband as a reference. So that's also very close to these results right here. So overall, probably not a major improvement for most people. If the Whoop testing is to be trusted, there might be a slight improvement for some people. So it's always good if they're working on this. I just don't know if it's going to make a drastic difference in the way you interpret your data and the way you actually use this data to make decisions on your day-to-day activity. Based on these results, I would say it's hard to say if the new Whoop strap algorithm is better or worse. The results do look different, and based on what I've seen, I would guess that the new algorithm estimates a bit more REM sleep and a bit less deep sleep. But it's difficult to say for sure with relatively little data. Wait, we can actually calculate this. Let me quickly code this out. So, I actually already prepared it a little bit, of course. So here I wrote some code. You can see it right here. I didn't look at the results fully yet. So we can take both the old algorithm and the new algorithm, and for the nights that I track the data, we can actually check what are the percentages of deep sleep, light sleep, REM sleep, and awake time. So let's have a look. So for the new algorithm, we have 21% deep sleep, 39% light sleep, 32% REM sleep, and 7% awake time. Whereas the old algorithm has 25% deep sleep, 46% light sleep, 26% REM sleep, and around 2% awake time. So indeed, we can see that the new algorithm has less deep sleep compared to the old one, also less light sleep actually, and more REM. And awake time is actually also quite a bit higher. At least this is based on the nights that I track my data. So it could be that the nights that I track my data now were a bit different for the old algorithm and new algorithm. However, if we assume that my sleep patterns were more or less the same for those 14 days with the new algorithm, and I think about 21 days with the old algorithm, I'd have to check the exact numbers. But if we assume these are the same, then the conclusion we just drew hold up. So the algorithm does appear to have changed, but my testing doesn't show a clear improvement. So what's going on here? Well, a number of things could explain this. But first, if you haven't subscribed yet, it would be great if you could do that. Or if you already subscribed, first of all, thanks so much. That really helps. If you want to help more, liking and commenting help. Or if you want to help me financially, I have channel memberships, which is like Patreon for YouTube. If you want to help me pay my editor, Alex, who's been instrumental in keeping this channel going. But back to the Whoop strap. Why did my testing show no real improvements? Well, the first thing I can think of is that even Whoop themselves only claim a 7% increase in performance, which is relatively small. Also, I only tested the new algorithm for 14 days, so maybe that just wasn't enough data to pick up on the difference. Also, my reference device isn't perfect, and given that the old algorithm was already quite good, maybe the error in my reference is large enough that I wouldn't be able to pick up on small changes when devices like the Whoop strap that are already quite good only show small improvements. Another reason could be is that the new Whoop algorithm basically just doesn't do better on me specifically. Maybe the old algorithm was already quite good on my particular physiology, and the new one just shows very little or no improvements. It could be that maybe for a woman, somebody with more awake moments, or one of a million other differences that could be different from other people compared to me, that these people do get more significant improvements. I also wore the Whoop strap on my biceps, and maybe if you wear it on your wrist, you only get the improvement, I'm not sure. Still, both the old algorithm and the new algorithm appear to be quite good at sleep stage tracking. For me, these are good enough, at least on my body they perform quite well, and also based on some independent testing I've done before, the Whoop strap appears to be quite good. It's not quite as good as the absolute best devices out there, like for instance the Oura Ring and Apple Watch, but it's super close, and maybe the new algorithm actually gets them even closer. So I think there's quite a small difference now between something like the Whoop strap, an Apple Watch, and an Oura Ring. Now, if you do decide to get the Whoop strap, an Oura Ring, and 8sleep 4, another great sleep stage tracker, and that can actually actively cool and heat each side of the bed, one of my favorite sleep tracking devices. Or if you want to get another device, or anything at all on Amazon for that matter, even something as small as toilet paper, and want to support the channel and save some money, there are different affiliate links in the description below that provide a discount. Now, given that you watched this whole video on the Whoop strap, I think you will like this video on the VO2 max measurements of the Whoop strap that they just introduced, or this video on the heart rate tracking of the Whoop strap.